welcome to episode 9 of Soundproof. We're back again. We're following up episode 8 with episode 9, as it should be. My name is Brendan Lewis. I go by Mr. BDog46 on the internet. And this week, it's a little bit new. I'm trying this thing where I'm joined by Jake Muller. He goes by Major Bowman on
Thank
the
you
internet.
for having me, Brendan.
And it's just, he's kindly decided to come on my podcast this week.
Before we go further, I need to stop you. You can't say howdy. I'm the one that can say howdy.
I can say it
Please do not appropriate my culture. I live in Texas and I go to a school whose motto is howdy. So.
I've been to Dallas twice. I think I get.
And I've been to Boston twice, so I guess I can say I'm from Boston
You
too.
park your car.
That's how that works. Yeah, I park my car and I don't know what I was gonna say after that.
It's the hub,
anyway.
The hub and
Welcome to Soundproof, everyone. The podcast where we're always on topic and never follow rabbit trails.
Right, exactly. I think we've made that name for ourselves at this point. So anyway, we're back with episode 9, and just before we get started here, we do have the tiniest bit of housekeeping to go over as we continue to kind of like tweak the way that we do things here to try and optimize them, optimize the podcast for ourselves and for our listeners. And this week, after optimizing previously for ourselves by changing the schedule from Thursday to Friday, which again is entirely Jake's fault. We've decided to do a bit of an optimization for you, the listener, this week. So we are very aware that our podcasts tend to run a little bit long.
So like looking at all of our podcasts, 3 of 8 have gone under an hour and a half, which wasn't our goal. Like we've even had one go over 2 hours, and that was the world's preview one, so I think we get a little pass for that one.
Mm-hmm.
But like our last 3 have been an hour 48, an hour 43, an hour 43, and we know that's a little bit long. The podcasts I generally listen to never run that long, and so we wanted to make a little bit of an adjustment. We're going to kind of cut down on some of the segments per se that we do in the beginnings. Like the ladder, instead of running through 20 teams, we'll just do 15 this week and probably from here on out. And then the tournament results, we're just going to focus on regionals and other majors, larger than regionals for now. If there's some like unique MSS that's either very large or has a very unique cut, or again some premier challenge that is unique in some way, we'll probably still hit on it. But considering most of the reported mid-seasons that we're finding these days come from Spain and nowhere else, that segment just kind of seems like an update on Spain's meta, which isn't super relevant for who I believe would be most of our listeners.
Right, and I think that we're also kind of at the point in Ultra Series where it's like lame duck format at this point. A lot of the teams that we talk about can be a little redundant. So I think it makes sense to cut down on us, talking about Kang Torn for the umpteenth time when they show up, well, because obviously it's going to be cutting local events and everything like that. So in the interest of brevity and relevance, which I think we've said a couple of times on this show.
That's all you. That's your phrase.
You said it once. I said not necessarily brevity, and you made sure that brevity was a key piece of what we were talking about. But anyway, we're going to try and cut it down. And of course, we will leave the second segment of our show untouched for now, which tends to, produce the most unique and interesting content, in our opinion anyway. So we'll leave that alone.
Yeah, I didn't want to touch that at all. Like, we were talking before we started recording this, and we were like, like those second halves with our guests always tend to be like super interesting conversation. In this case, we actually recorded that second half before this half, and so like we already knew what was happening in the second half, and it's impossible to go back and cut some of it out and like re-record because our guest is in a bit of a different time zone than us, as you will see when he comes on, but. That part we consider to be like the meat of the podcast, and this is kind of the appetizer segment where we talk about some other, not trivial stuff, but not as, deep and conversation-heavy stuff.
Right. So, I think that's it for housekeeping, so without further ado, we will jump into our -09 Pokemon this week, which Jake said he was excited about. I think he alluded last episode to having some good things to say about number 409, which we'll get into. But first, as we continue our kind of like tour through the, first couple of Pokemon in the entire series, we are on 9 this week, which is, of course, Blastoise.
Blastoise is like kind of vanilla for me. I know that might be like a hot take, an unpopular opinion, as they say. But like I've never really been excited by Blastoise. I usually liked Venusaur the most, and then would have picked Charizard after that. Like, it's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
It has a Mega. It's,
Its
it
Mega is
exists.
fine.
Yeah.
It has cool niches in singles when it's like a bulky water spinner and like has
Yeah.
good coverage moves and stuff like that. I think the biggest Blastoise pitfall is that it doesn't have Follow Me access anymore, which would have like
I
allowed
know.
it some degree of VGC relevance with like Fake Out,
Mhm.
Follow Me, and like water typing. I think I mentioned this last week when we were talking about Wartortle, that Blastoise wasn't originally a part of like the Squirtle Wartortle line. Thought that was kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Mhm.
But yeah, cool. The other thing, I always like to talk about this is like the red and blue speed runs are very reliant on Blastoise, which I think is
Oh,
really
really?
interesting. Yeah,
Why is that?
It's like there's like a meta, and that some of these games that have been speed run so much, it's because it gives you super easy clear of Brock and Mount Moon, I think, and that's kind of like the early part of the game where there's the biggest variance. So once you get past like
Mm.
some of those earlier areas, you can clear a lot of the later stuff much easier when you have your levels and stuff, as I
That makes
understand
sense.
it. Yep. So anyway, there's Blastoise. 109 is a Pokemon that is necessarily near and dear to Jake's heart, being the tier leader that he is Coughing.
I mean, yeah, Coughing is the Smogon mascot, but I've liked Coughing for like ever. Whenever I was super young and like watching the Pokemon TV show, I was always a big fan of James and his coughing and wheezing, and so wheezing is actually one of my top 5 favorite Pokemon. I can't really rank them outside of Victini at number 1, obviously.
Was that before its Galar form?
Oh yeah, I've loved wheezing forever. I have
Oh.
like a wheezing plush. It's one of my plushes that's out on my dresser right now.
Interesting.
I love it. I'll talk more about wheezing next week. But coughing is cool too. I love purple, and I like the whole like concept of this thing puffing out gas. I don't know why, but
Okay.
I just like it.
You can have that one, I guess. Number 209, as we head into Johto here, is Snubble. That line has like always been really forgettable for me, I think. Back when
Yeah.
it was at first just like a normal type, and then it was just like a fairy type, and it has Intimidate. Like you would think an Intimidate fairy type might be pretty cool, but it's like pretty bad. I don't know.
Yeah, like I think the only time it was relevant is when it first got that fairy typing, and everyone like knew Toy Syndromed it and kind of messed around with it for a little bit. But it's never really been relevant in VGC
I
like
think
at
Gary
all.
Chan used it once, didn't he?
I mean, what hasn't he used?
But I think he placed well with it. Oh, it was in 17 when he was using Grand Bull Snorlax, like Grand Bull Snorlax Trick Room stuff.
Oh, yeah, Granbull Snorlax.
Obviously, Grand Bull Snorlax. One kills the fighting types and the other one kills everything else. 309 is Electrike, which is a line that I've always really liked.
Mhm.
I'm like a Hoenn fanboy, and it being like an early game electric type was really cool, and I'm a big fan of Manectric as well. But Electrike itself, though, I remember it was always really hard to train because it doesn't get Spark until like kind of late, so you have to survive on like Quick Attack and Bite.
It's the same with Shinx.
Yeah,
Shinx is the
it's a
same way.
lot
It's
of those
really
like
annoying.
early game Pokemon where you just have to like pay your dues before you get to
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
like use the Pokemon for real. Number 409 is Rampardos, which Jake
Yay.
apparently has a public service announcement, or at least something to say about Rampardos.
No,
It's
like-
forgettable to me.
Rampardos is a really... It has a good place in my heart because in 2015, me and Abe Seco built a Rampardos team. And it was originally just as a joke. We were like, oh, super strong rock slide and head smash and blah, blah, blah. It was something we used for fun. And then one time I was playing in a Nugget Bridge live, like one of those live tournaments we used to hold. And it was a 7-round tournament, and I was streaming it, and I used that Rampardos team. And I had like a running count of the number of kills Rampardos got, and I was like intentionally trying to force them. And it got up to something like, I don't know, 13 or 14 in 7 rounds. Like, it was crazy.
So it actually took a lot. Like, well, if you're forcing
yeah.
them, I guess you could do it with any number of Pokemon. But Rampardos.
I mean, I wasn't necessarily
is one of
forcing it,
those
but it was
things
like
that does
it was
do a
like
lot
the
of
main
damage.
offensive Pokemon on the team. The team was Metagross, Talonflame, Hitmontop, Amoonguss, Gastrodon, Rampardos.
Okay. It's like purely a Rampardos team. That's like
Yeah, so you
all
like
Rampardos
Tailwind,
support.
you redirect water with Gastrodon, you have
Right.
Amoonguss. It was really fun. Did you know that spread Rock Slide Oko Salamence from Rampardos with Life Orb?
Well, I do now.
Yeah,
I
it's
think-
really strong.
I think Jamie had one of those Rampardos calcs in the. Oh man, I gave it away. Our guest has one of those calcs in.
Well,
in
they'll see the
second-
title anyway.
The second half of our show, but he mentioned that, which we can allude
Yeah.
to now because we did it first. Anyway, 509 is Purloin. super forgettable for me.
Meh.
Actually.
Meh. It's just
Aside
boring.
from the fact that I recently found out that it is a pure dark type and not, in fact, a normal dark type.
Purloin is one of those mons that you always have to see a million of in like the first 2 routes of a game, and you just get super sick of it.
Yeah.
And it has like no redeeming value if you catch it. It's just a terrible Pokemon.
It's not even like well designed. It's like a cat that stands on its 2 legs and looks really bizarre. Like,
Yeah.
get on all fours. Number 609 is Chandelure.
I love
which is a
Chandelure.
really cool Pokemon. I
Yeah.
think it's like pretty universally liked as a Pokemon overall, except maybe by Pokken players, because as I recall, it's kind of miserable to play against.
Oh yeah.
I always remember like in the very, very early Black and White days when it was leaking, and because it was leaked in Japan first, or it wasn't leaked in Japan, it was released in Japan, so we were getting all the information, and
Right.
everybody was like just blown away by the base stat, which has since been creeped, but
Yeah.
the base 140 special attack, or is it 145?
It's one of those.
And then there was like a rumor that it was going to get Shadow Tag, and then people were
Well,
like,
it had Shadow Tag for
absolutely
its hidden ability.
losing their. Oh, it did get it. That's right.
Yeah, it was never released.
Yeah.
And that got changed to Infiltrator.
Cool.
Boo.
I guess.
Or was it Infiltrator or Flame Body? One of
I
those
think
two.
it's Infiltrator is the hidden one.
Yeah.
Anyway, it doesn't
Okay.
have Shadow Tag anymore, which was like the big thing.
That would have been
Um,
disgusting.
Yeah, there's no need for that.
No.
Number 709 is Trevenant, which, as I voiced last week, is the less cooler of the Ghost Grass lines. But it's alright. It's like kind of a cool Pokemon. It saw a tiny bit of use in 17, I think, as like an alternative Trick Room setter.
Yeah, it's a cool mon. It's October. It's spooky season.
Yeah.
We have it's the time for our friends with ghost typing and Halloweeny themes. So Trevenant fits here pretty well. I like it. It's a really cool design.
Sure, it's allowed. Yeah, I think it's fine.
It's allowed.
It can stay.
I'll allow it to exist.
Not all of the Pokemon this week are allowed. Trevenant is. And then a final one, as we are getting close to the point where we'll be cutting out. I think this is actually the last
is the
of
last
the
one,
additional
yeah.
one. Yeah, is Melmetal, which is the last Pokemon by number that exists at this time, which is cool. Ash has one now, which is interesting. I think it's his first mythical, right?
I think so.
I
yeah.
would think it is. Maybe it's his first mythical or legendary that he's actually captured, right?
Yeah, quite possibly. I don't
Yeah.
remember if he's had any other legends.
Yeah. Anyway, it's kind of cool. Cool Pokemon. I think it's like animated really well.
Yeah,
in
definitely.
the anime where it like swings its arms around like
Yeah.
like they're attached to rubber bands, and like it's cool looking in the anime.
It looks like it should be pretty rigid, but like I think the point is that it's kind of fluid
Yeah, it's like
inside.
fluid metal. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. It's
Yeah,
really
cool Pokemon. Yep, definitely. We'll never see it in VGC, but it's cool. All right, so that's it for 9. We will be cutting 1 down as we go into the 10s next week. What is number 10? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to see how many I can get through where I can actually name like the Kantos off the top of my head. Is Blastoise and what is it? Caterpie is number 10?
I think so.
I think it's Caterpie.
Yeah, we'll see next week.
Yeah, we'll find out. But we'll jump into the ladder here, and as Jake mentioned a little bit earlier, this is one area that had 5 teams as the casualty. So all of you ladder climbers who are desperate for a shout out on our show, you're gonna have to try to aim a little bit higher.
Yeah, well,
we've cut down
it
just
just means
5
we gotta
teams,
get the best of the
so-
best now.
Yep, that's true. So
Yeah,
starting.
so our first team of the night is actually not the only time it appears in this list,
Mhm.
but it's a team of Solgaleo, Yveltal, Salamence, Tapu Koko, Incineroar, and Gastrodon, which is kind of cool. Like Solgaleo, Yveltal is something Tommy used and I stole.
We
in,
talked about it this
Moon
format.
series, I think.
When we were building our Nats team, we
Oh
had
yeah,
talked
yeah,
about
that is
using-
something that came up.
I think
forgot
that
about
was like the first iteration. Like that was like the first
It was.
paste you sent me before I was like, okay, Jake, this like, or maybe you came to it on your own. That like this can't be.
No,
solo
it's
play.
it's because Tommy gave me that Moon series team
Right,
like a
which
couple weeks after Dallas, and I
that was
loved
a
it and used it
that
a
was a
lot.
soak team.
Yeah, it was.
That was like a soak team. Weirdly,
Yeah.
which is
So
not
I
something you'd
had
expect,
that in
but-
my head, and I tried to remake it, and it ended up being really bad.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good version of it. This seems pretty solid.
I think I had the first 5 on paper at one point, or in the builder, but I never would have like thought to use something like Gastrodon without Rayquaza.
Yeah.
The next team is same restricted pair,
Mhm.
which is a thing now apparently. but features Tapu Fini, Ludicolo, Scrafty, and Naganadel. So
This is like
very
this is
different
a Moon
approach.
Series team, like literally.
Is it actually?
Not literally, but like it could be.
Oh, okay.
Like, cause like Ludicolo was really big back when Scarfogre was the wave,
Right.
and then I mean Scrafty and Naganadel just kind of appeared.
Yeah,
out of
you're
nowhere.
kind of
I don't
right.
really know what they're doing.
The first four, at least, definitely do kind of
Yeah.
look like they were built in much the same way that those Zygarde teams were being built in Moon Series, where it was like, okay, like Water Spout is gonna be a problem for anything that this wants to do. So we either pick Toxicroak or Ludicolo.
Yeah.
Yep. The next team is a team we've seen before: is Xerneas,
Mhm.
Kyogre, Metagross, Incineroar, Tornadus, and Amoonguss. I kind of like that variant of the Xerneas Kyogre stuff. I don't always have a huge problem getting rid of Kangaskhan.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's some times when it just doesn't do a whole lot, and a lot of times the Incineroar Tornadus lead can serve a lot of the same purposes.
If not better purposes. With
yeah, it
U-turn
opens
too.
up U-turn Tailwind instead of always
Yeah.
having to be faking out or going for damage or whatever. But anyway, X-Ray is next on the ladder with Gengar, Tapu Lele, Incineroar, and Amoonguss. I think this is a unique 6, but
I think it is.
that it has to be Life Orb, Earth Power Ray, right?
You would think so, yeah. That just gets murdered by Stakataka otherwise.
Well, and Groudon.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah.
This seems like a much more offensive take on X-Ray. Like, a lot of times, the 4 mons that aren't X-Ray on X-Ray are, much more defensive in nature, like Tapu Fini. Incineroar and Amoonguss is standard, but, in this case, we have Lele and Gengar, which are much more, in-your-face offense type of mons, and so...
Mhm.
I guess this is a more of a variant that tries to hold
So
the pedal
pin it,
down instead
yeah.
of kind of tap on it and hit the brakes sometimes too.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks weird without Tapu Fini, but
It really does.
I'm a Lele fan recently, so the next team on the ladder is Spain Rain, as that continues to be a metagame defining team at this time. It seems like that's going to be the final word on Ray Ogre as we come to the end of the format here.
Right.
There are only so many majors left. Not a ton of innovation going on, it seems like. But the next team on the ladder is another Solgaleo Yveltal.
It's the same as number 1.
No, it has a Whimsicott's on the next line. Sorry, I saw Whimsicott
Yeah, this
at
is
the
the
corner
same
of my
team
eye
as number
there.
1.
Anyway, the next team is Kyogre, Rayquaza, Metagross, Tapu Koko, Incineroar, and Whimsicott. So yeah, pretty.
I feel like we've seen this 6 at some point.
At least something resembling it.
Yeah.
But it's
They all kind of run together.
Yeah, a mishmash of the last handful of supports that can be in there. Whimsicott's a good one though.
Yeah.
The next team: Necrozma, Dawnwings, Groudon, Kangaskhan, Tapu Fini, Amoonguss, and Stakataka. So that's interesting because that seems like almost the kind of team where you'd be expecting a non-ultra Dusk main instead of a Dawnwing. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's like a Lunalium Trick Room version.
I could see that.
Seems like it could be.
I could still see it being ultra too. But the Stakataka Amoonguss could possibly indicate Trick Room. I definitely agree there.
Yeah. I think fast Earth Power is a lot to be said for that sort of team because otherwise,
yeah, for sure.
Precipice Blades gets in your face. The next team: Necrozma, Duskmane, Groudon, Salamence, Tapu Lele, Stakataka, and Jumpluff. So it's Tommy's team with Jumpluff over Smeargle, which isn't awful. I think that's actually kind of
it's
alright.
It's not terrible. Yeah, it's a. I mean, they do similar things.
Rage Powder.
You can't redirect
sleep.
Grasses with Smeargle, but otherwise you have Rage Powder, like you said.
And it's just just a faster sleep, I guess, which flips.
Yeah. And it has some really cool moves. It has Encore and Helping Hand.
Yeah. It gives you
there's a bunch of options there you have to respect.
To if you're not running Scarf Lele, you can check Coco with certain leads. Or even if you are running Scarf Lele, you can switch it in and sleep it because Coco is something that can give Necrozma some problems. And it's kind of interesting. Maybe it's just Tommy on an alt.
I doubt that. He would never drop Smeargle.
That's true. The next team: Kyogre, Rayquaza, Tapu Koko, Incineroar, Crobat, and Ferrothorn.
The 2 forbidden ones on one team.
Must kill Xerneas.
I mean, yeah, that's. I want to say we've seen that before too. I'm pretty sure we've talked about.
They all
Crobat,
run together,
Ferrothorn.
like you said.
Yeah, but that's definitely the anti-Xerneas mode on Rayogre because Rayogre, Koko, and Incineroar just folds to Xerneas after it's boosted.
Right, and in a similar vein, it's the same 5 but with Nihilego over Crobat as the next team on the ladder.
Yeah.
So it's the same idea.
Mm-hmm.
but without the Tailwind option. Moving on down is the only Groudon Yveltal of the week with Metagross, Tapu Koko, Incineroar, Venusaur, and that's obviously the team that Joe UX has been terrorizing the format with. Like I thought,
Mm-hmm.
I thought Venusaur was over, and then it was uncanceled.
I don't really get Venusaur in like a Primals meta though. Like I know it saw some use in 2016, and it's like being used now, but as soon as Ray comes in, Ray just kind of invalidates it.
Yeah, it's like a scary Pokemon though. So, like if you don't have Rayquaza and you don't have like Tapu Fini or something that it can least like prevent sleep, it's just
Yeah.
like you get into playing four-sided coin flips, where three of them you lose.
True, yeah.
The next team is an X-Ray with Fini, Incineroar, Salazzle, and Amoonguss. So doubling down on the Fire-type fake-out users, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
So a debate that we will be having later in this podcast is Incineroar versus Salazzle. And this person just decided not to have that debate and use both.
The Por qué no los dos?
Yeah, exactly.
Moving on down, Kyogre, Rayquaza, Kangaskhan, Tapu Fini, Incineroar, Stakataka. And that is something that's a little bit different looking and kind of intriguing.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen Kang with Ray at all this year. Kind of interesting. Yeah, I think that Kang does support Ogre pretty well, like fast fake out with a bunch of damage options on its own with double edge and even like a flinch mode with bite. Really
Flinch
can't be too
mode.
bad. Yeah, but like, yeah, I guess if you're not playing against Groudon and you don't need Rayquaza, then Kang might do a little bit better job next to Kyogre. So I kind of respect it.
Yeah.
And then like the rest of the team is just kind of
Rayquaza is still
Okay,
a
good one.
useful Pokemon even when it's not Mega, and that was
true. Yeah.
something that kind of fell out in the change from 16 to 2019 Ultra. As we saw a lot in certain portions of 16 with people using like Mega Gengar and Rayquaza
Yeah.
on the same team, and there hasn't been so much of that. Like it's a lot heavier on the Rayquaza, like as a presence on the team as opposed to just like an airlock bot, which was
Yeah,
it seemed like it
definitely.
was in some cases. The last Pokemon team on the ladder is Xerneas, Groudon, Salamence, Tapu Fini, Incineroar, Kartana. Those first five being pretty standard, and then Kartana being the choice of six there, and even that
Yeah, I
six
mean,
is
even-
kind of
I
standard
was gonna
at this
say.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, that 6 is pretty common.
So not anything that you're shocked to see, but remains a strong team in the archetype.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the ladder, the top 15 teams that Jake was able to pull this week. Do you know how many it was out of?
In the 20s.
In the 20s. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're still doing pretty well with not a ton of like important majors coming up.
Right.
And speaking of majors, we have one to discuss, which was Knoxville, which had
yes.
its fair share of drama,
Yeah.
which is something that I don't know. I guess we'll avoid going into. I think everything that needed to be said was said on
that horse
Twitter.
has been beaten to death, I think, at this point.
Yeah, so we will kind of just jump into the results here, and of course, the winner and runner-up are Kyle Livinghouse and Joe Costiola, who are good friends and were trip buddies, and that's all that I'll say about that. But it was kind of an interesting final in that regard, given that you see this a lot in the community, but players that like test against each other and are in each other's head, and they've played against each other even on stream before, so it becomes less of like your teams matching up and more of like who can get one step ahead of their friend.
Right. I think even without the other drama surrounding them at this tournament, I know the two of them are like super close friends, and like seeing them both make finals at a tournament is really
it's
cool.
super exciting.
And like I know that even though like Kyle beat Joey, I know Joey was super happy for Kyle and super happy with how he did himself, and so stories like that where you can like see that these two people that have been working together for a while and are pretty close friends, both have this great success is really nice.
Right, and I think the other thing that's cool is they both kind of like took what was quote unquote their team, with Kyle winning the tournament with Kang Torn, which was something that he was instrumental in popularizing. Although of course he was originally in favor of the Como Mawile variant that we've said more than enough about, and ended up winning the tournament with what's become a more standard variant of the team featuring the Incineroar and the Amoonguss.
Yeah.
And Joe has been playing Xerneas Lunala since before
Sun Series
even started.
Right.
He had been playing it in like the online ultra tournaments that were being run in Japan. And I think he was like the popularizer of Lucario. Um,
I believe so. Yeah.
so the idea of Xerneas Lunala fighting type is certainly not a new one. But using Gallade in the fighting type
Yeah.
slot is a little bit of a new idea, and it makes a lot of sense when you just kind of like project the importance of a fighting type for that restricted pairing specifically, where you just get to like punch Incineroar in the face, you get to
Yeah.
punch Kangaskhan in the face, you get to
Punch
punch
Stakataka
Stakataka in the face,
Yeah.
right? So you can use basically any like Pokemon in that slot that can pick up KOs at -1. And Joey's opted to use Gallade here, and I think he said that he had Wide Guard and Helping Hand on it. If I
believe
recall.
so. Yeah.
And it's kind of an interesting Pokemon in the sense that it comes from the Gardevoir line, so it has all these like really interesting tech moves.
Oh yeah.
That are support moves. Like it gets like Encore, Ally
Switch.
like
Taunt, Will-O-Wisp. Yeah. It's got some weird stuff for a fighting type, but
right.
Yeah. Like I think the Wide Guard, like you said, is the reason he used it. He definitely
Right.
wanted that Wide Guard in his team.
Mm.
And then Helping Hand is so huge with both Lunala and Xerneas.
Right.
Like a Helping Hand Moongeist Beam, Helping Hand Moonraze Menacing Maelstrom, and then anything boosted from Xerneas is terrifying with Helping Hand too. So he said that, in talking to him after the tournament, he said that Gallade did exactly what he needed it to do. So
Right.
not something I ever would have expected to see in finals at a tournament, but clearly the right pick for this team.
Right, and again, it like makes sense where if you're basically just picking, something that learns close combat, and then figuring out what kind of tech moves or support moves that you want in the other slots. And is it Steadfast or Inner Focus?
It's Inner Focus.
It's Inner
It has
Focus.
Steadfast in normal form.
Oh,
sure.
that's what it is. That's probably why I can remember. So it's also like a nice fake out check in that sense, given that kind of Kang has been on the rise recently. But anyway, that's the finalists. In top 4 were Joe UX9 running the team that is. I lost
Uniquely
to it.
his.
I lost to it at Atlantic City, and this is why it's just like really annoying. I didn't think that sleep was something I had to prepare aggressively for, so all I had was the Tapu Lele, so he just led Venusaur. I didn't play Joe. I played Sir Chicken, but it was just like I had nothing to do against Venusaur other than like lead 2 things that could kill it and hope that he missed a sleep powder on turn 1, and he didn't. But yeah, that team has been all over the ladder, has results in various tournaments, and has kind of been pretty important towards the latter stages of the meta here. And then in 4th here was a Xerneas, Lunala, Lucario, Lele, Incineroar, and Amoonguss, which is pretty well established. I think Smeargle tends to slide into the Amoonguss slot in some cases.
Yeah, that's the one I've seen. That's the one I accidentally got CP with in one of those online ICs this year.
You accidentally got CP with it?
Well, I was playing some games in between studying for my PhD qualifying exam, and I would just accidentally won a bunch of games and accidentally got top 32.
Oh darn! I'm just so good at this game.
I ruined my CP this season. It was disgusting. I do think it's kind of ironic that this team made top 4 in a tournament where the OG XL player also was in the top, and so it's kind of like the changing of the guard of XL in a way. The old has been cast out by the new, and Gallade has taken over the reins from Lucario. Yeah, exactly. I guess speaking of old versus new, like the very next team, number 5, is that Como Mawile version of King Tornzur and Dawn,
which Keith swears by, which is really annoying. He is convinced that that's the best. Like he took it to a mid-season a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, anyone who doesn't think Mawile is good on this team is an idiot. Okay, Keith.
Okay. And ironically, he lost to Kyle and Cut too.
Right. Yeah.
So
I
don't know about that one,
eat
but
his words in that regard. But yeah. Alex Underhill was at 6. I think this is a unique 6 at least in the sense that it has 2 steals, but it is Ray Ogre. Well, those 2 steals. I don't think I've seen that combination. But Ray Ogre, Metagross, Coco, Incineroar, and then Celesteela being the last one is not a shock to see, but I'm not sure that I've definitely seen that before.
I don't think I have either.
Right.
I get it makes sense. We keep talking about Ray Ogre having a terrible Xerneas matchup, so throwing 2 steals on it that wall it pretty hard. Can't go wrong,
Yeah, makes sense. At 7th is James Evans with his first Masters cut. I think that was pretty cool. But he's running Xerneas Groudon with Kangaskhan Tornadus, and then Amoonguss and Hitmontop.
It's like the Kyle version with top instead of...
A little bit, right, like with the fighting type option.
Right,
obviously
true.
Stakataka can give, Kangtorn its share of issues. So it makes sense in kind
Yeah.
of the same way that having Gallade there to punch stuff in the face does.
Mm-hmm.
And then rounding out the top 8 is Jeremy Rodriguez, who has brought Cresselia back from the dead.
Is this the first crest cut we've had on Ultra?
I don't know if it's like the first ever crest cut. I'm sure that it got CP at some point, but
I mean, like at a regional or above.
I'm not sure. I'm not. I don't think that it. I wouldn't think that it is. Like if I was betting, I would say that it's probably got CP from somewhere, but I couldn't tell you what it is.
Yeah.
I thought its demise was like pretty well documented and understood, given that
Not
like,
exaggerated.
it doesn't deal with Incineroar, and Yveltal is a little bit more prevalent this format.
Lunala, and also
yeah,
Lunala.
yeah, that too.
I saw. So when we were talking in Monarchs earlier about skill swap mechanics, and someone asked like a trivia question, like if Crest skill swaps, Primordial Scene, blah blah blah, with these speeds and whatever, which ability gets activated first? And I think it was K-Swas that said it just gets Moongeist beamed, and it does.
That's exactly what happens.
Yeah. One thing
Sorry, I
that's
haven't seen
interesting
it,
from this cut though is that all of the X2s that made cut lost in top 8, and I'm pretty sure that Keith said he was the lowest 6-1.
Oh, so the seating is just like top to bottom there? Like,
No, that can't be right because Keith played Kyle, and Kyle was the first seed, so Keith had to
okay.
be. Wait, no, that's not right either. I don't know. Because Keith was 6-1, he couldn't have been 8, so Kyle couldn't have been 1.
Was Kyle? Yeah, that was what I was gonna say. Is maybe Kyle wasn't the first seed.
That's possible.
I think Joe might have been the first seed.
Who knows?
I don't know. In the end, it doesn't matter. But
yeah, all the 5-2s made it, lost in top 8, and then I'm trying to remember. I thought Keith said that he was the lowest 6-1, and so if that was the case, then the 4 bottom seeds in top 8 all lost in top 8, which is kind of interesting.
yeah.
It's probably happened before, but not too common.
Right, but they do get an extra 20 CP up on the other X2s who are all in top 16 here, as we'll run through that real quick. Ian McLaughlin showing up in top 16 with I know we've seen him run those kind of like weird Lele sets before, but he does have Xerneas Lunala with Kangaskhan, Tapu Lele, Kartana, and Smeargle. It looks a lot like you'd expect an Ian McLaughlin team to look. I think that he kind of just like slaps those last 4 alongside any restricted pairing,
right?
And still kind of like
Ian loves Smeargle Xerneas.
Right, yeah, he loves and I think he was using Kang Smeargle a lot back when that was a thing, when Dark Void and Power of Punch existed.
I know a while ago he was using like absolute min speed Lele in order to lead it against Feeney.
Right, I don't know if that's still what it is, but it certainly could be.
Yeah.
At 10th is George Tifferman, who's running Xerneas. It looks a lot like Hirosi's team. I'm sorry, I was thinking I was thinking Necrozma, but anyway, it's Groudon, Necrozma, Salamence, Tapu Lele, Umbreon there, and then instead of the Kangaskhan, he's opted for a Venusaur. So it looks like Joe UX9 is leaking into some other archetypes here. At 11th is Ashton Cox with Xerneas, Groudon, Kangaskhan, Tornadus, Incineroar, and then a Nihilego instead of what tends to fall into the Amoonguss slot there. But I think that's kind of interesting because it gives you a potential Trick Room option.
Yeah.
Like Clear Smog, if you want to bail out of Xerneas Mirrors a little bit harder.
I'm not sure I've seen Nihilego on King Torn before. It's kind of cool. I like Nihilego a lot as a Pokemon, but I'm not sure if it entirely fits right here.
I kind of like it there, honestly. Like, I don't like the archetype as a whole, but it kind of makes sense as to why it's there. At 12th is Cedric Darushi, who continues his early season tear here. I think he's in first in CP, if I'm not mistaken.
Something like that, yeah.
I would have to double check, but I'm pretty sure he's got an invite already. I know that. Yeah. But he's eschewed his Yveltal Hitmontop team in favor of Ray Ogre, Gengar, Tapu Koko, Incineroar, and Celesteela. So it looks like it still has a lot of the same Perish Trap elements that were in his previous team, but sans bad fighting type. At 5-2 is a team of I almost said Xerneas again. Groudon, Yveltal, Gengar, Tapu Koko, Incineroar, and Landorus, and that screams Perish even a little bit harder than Cedric's team does.
Yeah, definitely. This is almost certainly a Perish Gengar, which makes sense. I think the standard is Feeney over Koko, but I like Koko, and that kind of parish team because it gives you another pivot. So
Right.
I can't really complain about that.
I think Gengar Coco is like the lead in a lot of those. Like that's what you do when you want to set up your parish mode.
That
Because
makes
then
sense.
you can like Volt right into Incineroar and have Fake Out on turn 2. Anyway, 14th place is maybe the most unique team of the tournament, and it looks like low ladder is leaking a little bit. It is Rayquaza, Ho-Oh, Tapu Koko, Incineroar, Landorus, and Toxapex.
Toxapex.
Which is one of those things that is all over low ladder. For whatever reason, people in the 1000s just absolutely adore Toxapex.
I don't know. It's a poison type that's really fat, so it beats Xerneas or something like that.
Does it? Well, it learns Haze. Like
Yeah.
it has the tools that would make you think that it might be like a serviceable Pokemon. Like it has Wide Guard, Baneful Bunker is cool.
And I mean, it actually
has Haze, and then like obviously anything that can use Scald next to a Rayquaza is going to do a lot of damage to Groudon. So it like
I'm sure that it beats a lot of things one-on-one with like Toxic Recover, Baneful Bunker, like stall kind of
you
stuff.
just can't
But
kill it. Yep.
like in 2-on-2, that just doesn't really work as well.
Right, exactly. Like it's a high tier OU Pokemon, but
Yeah.
like I
Like
don't know.
top tier.
It's cool that it got CP. Like it kind of makes sense. Like you would think that if you're going to use it at all, it would be next to Rayquaza. So there it is. 15th place team, and I think Justin said he went 0-2 to 5-2, which is kind of cool that he snuck into CP there. Is the same team that Alex Underhill was using. I think they did a lot of building together. Is Ray Ogre, Incineroar, Coco, and then Metagross Celesteela again.
Yeah.
And then the final team, which was the only 4-3 to get CP, is Groudon, Dawnwings Necrozma, Mawile, Mega Charizard Y, according to this graphic, and then Lele Smeargle. So I don't know what the hell Mega Charizard Y is doing there. Like I thought we all just agreed that that wasn't going to be a thing a long time ago. But
I mean,
like,
it
why
still
would you
has the
just
sun.
use Solar Power Charizard?
I don't know.
Like if you were gonna go that route, like I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't
like,
pretend to understand it. but-
Whatever.
Hey, it still got C. It didn't go a year without getting CP, so good for it. You go,
Sure.
Charizard.
Okay. I mean, like with all the megas that were getting CP at a lot of the local events last weekend, it was like a whole thing. Like you could have just used it there. You didn't have to bring it to a regional, man.
Right.
But whatever. I'm proud of Charizard. It's trying its best. But anyway, that's gonna wrap up our first segment here. So as I leaked and as you're seeing in the title anyway, we are joined by one James Boyt, Jamie Boyt of Europe.
Whose name is definitely James, no matter what he tells you.
Please call him James forever and ever. But he is, one of the best players in Europe and one of the best players in the world right now, and of course does have that reputation for himself of using some of those offbeat Pokemon, which we will refer to as niche mons for the remainder of this session. So we've talked to him a little bit about that, some of his team building values, his play style, and if you're somebody that likes to experiment with some of those unique Pokemon, he's definitely the person that you want to be taking his advice.
Yep, we had a really cool interview with Jamie coming up, so just wait a few seconds while I play some cool music and splice these two segments together, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back, Cottonee lovers. Thanks for sticking with us over our short break here. We are very excited to be here with the second half of this week's show, and we alluded to it a little bit, but we have a very exciting guest this week, and we are joined by none other than Jamie Boyt. Jamie, welcome to our show.
Hello, it's great to be here. I didn't know there were more than one Cottonee lovers, so this is good.
Well, now you know. You got a little look into the inside. And Jake, would you please go ahead and introduce our guest here before we dive into our topic?
Of course, for those unaware, Jamie is one of the best UK players of all time. He has 2 top 16 finishes at the World Championships, most recently at the 2019 Championships, where he, I believe, was the first seed after Swiss in day 2. And then he has also won 3 regional championships. He top 16'd the 2017 Brazil International Championships as well. So very accomplished player, both locally and internationally. But most importantly, the NPA 8 MVP for the Melee City Monarchs. the most
Yes.
crowning of his achievements, in my opinion.
Yes, definitely the most important.
without any semblance of bias.
No, not at all.
Of course not.
So for those of you, and hopefully most of the people listening to this podcast know who Jamie is, you'll know that he is well known for selecting Pokemon that fall into what many would call an outside the meta category, although maybe he would disagree with you in that regard. But that's using Pokemon that other people don't tend to use is kind of the way that Jamie's made his name alongside all those fantastic finishes that Jake just listed off. So that's the reason that we wanted to have him on, to talk a little bit about, how and why and what go on with, the selections and the usage of some of these Pokemon that Jamie has piloted to all of his finishes over the years here. So Jamie, we just we'll start out by just kind of asking, like, when and why did you start out using Pokemon that are, kind of coming out of left field, as opposed to like trying to, start or learn the game out of something that's a little bit closer to like, the metagame?
I think the when is straight away, really, because the first
Right
ever
out of the
regional I
womb.
went to, first regional I went to, I used what people would consider some strange Pokemon. That had like Charizard X, Superior, Lucario, Togekiss, things like that. At that point, I was just going for fun. Like I had built a semi-serious team. I didn't really know what I was doing. But apparently it turned out I did know what I was doing somewhat, which was quite surprising. So, and then it just kept on going from there. I was just going to PCs, just using fun Pokemon, still ending up winning with those fun Pokemon for some reason. I don't think I've ever really been a standard player. I've definitely tried out the standard stuff. You need to have played the standards to be able to counter it, I think. So I have definitely tried out the standard stuff, but it just doesn't gel with me for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Well, that was going to be my next question. If you've played all of this, like, or some of the standard stuff before, what is it exactly that like keeps you coming back to some of the off meta stuff?
I think the main thing for me is like team preview stuff. Immediately I have an advantage against my opponents if I'm using off meta stuff, because I'll know the matchups against the common stuff, but they won't know the matchups against the uncommon teams. So it immediately gives me an advantage if I'm able to make a successful off-meta team.
Right. So it gives you like the edge in team preview, and I'm sorry, I just like completely lost my train of thought. So Jake, please, by all means, if you have a question for Jamie.
That kind of leads into something though. Like if you're using all these off-meta picks all the time, do you kind of expect people to know what these off-meta Pokemon do, or like generally, like one example, just out of random, if you picked a Pokemon at random, say like Mime Jr., and you had it on your team for a valid reason, like I'm sure the reason that you've picked this random Pokemon that happens to be Mime Jr. in this case is valid, and it has this role on your team, but would you expect someone else to know what it is?
Well, the Mime Juniors, for a start off, is going to be a Cresselia that needs Fake Out and Helping Hand.
Oh my god.
That's why you would use it. And also so you can set Trick Room without being roared, because Mime Junior gets Soundproof.
Wow. Well, see, like, he came ready, guys.
It's because it's soundproof, Jake.
Yes.
But,
Yeah. There we go. But yeah, like, I think I work under the assumption that everyone knows what my Pokemon will do. In the sense of they will know what the Pokemon can carry,
right,
but not what it will carry. Because I do tend to run... People would probably label it gimmicks, but I definitely think they're techs instead of gimmicks. Where I tech something onto the team to help with a matchup that would be very surprising for other people.
I think we're at the point where it's a tech for you and a gimmick for everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think like the first example that came to mind was my Fling Salazzle. People would probably initially say that was a gimmick, but that helped my matchup against so many things, just in general. Like being able to flinch anything slower than Rayquaza, again, after the Fake Out, is good in pretty much any matchup you're going to face. So I definitely wouldn't think that would be considered a gimmick, even though a lot of people would.
Yeah, and like that example specifically, a lot of Pokemon like Raichu and Weavile have run Fling in the past before, like pretty successfully, and I don't think that anyone would have looked at Salazzle and said, oh yeah, that's going to be a Fling's Rockmon. Because I don't even think, like I wouldn't have known that Salazzle had Fling until I saw you using it. And so, like, that kind of thing, I fully agree that's more of like a tech than a gimmick in that case, especially because, it's something that's been proven to work on other teams and
Yeah.
other Pokemon. So like, why not apply it here if you can too?
Yeah, I think that the knowledge thing as well. I think I have above average knowledge of what off meta Pokemon can do,
Right.
purely because I use them so much. So maybe I'm a little bit biased towards how much knowledge should be known about the Pokemon, and maybe I think that something should be known whereas the opponent won't, and that could end up hurting me and catching me off guard in a sense.
Right.
I expect them to think my Pokemon would be doing something when they don't expect it.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They make the different move.
I think there are some things that you could probably apply that to pretty reasonably well. Like, if you're using some random, like, Wide Guard or Tailwind mon, like, okay, people know, like, what gets Wide Guard and what gets Tailwind for the most part. But there are some instances, like a Fling is another good example of this, I think.
I would not claim to know the distribution of Fling.
Yeah, so I think it kind of depends on what you're using this Pokemon for. If it's something that is unique to that Pokemon, then it's probably going to be more.
Yeah, but you can also use knowledge or expected knowledge against people as well. I think the best example is my 2016 Aegislash. It didn't run White Guard. It had Shadow Sneak over White Guard. But I would make so many plays, like against a Groudon, that could go for Precipice Blades.
Yeah.
I would make the play expecting them to Fire Punch. So then I would just protect the Pokemon next to Aegislash, leave it in Blade form and just attack, even though I could have just got KO'd to the Precipice Blades.
I thought you were going to say Static
can...
Raichu there instead of Aegislash.
Yeah, that was suboptimal. I think it was right at the time though.
Okay.
Because electric types were less common than Skill Swap. That's my argument.
Yeah, that's fair.
That makes sense.
But yeah, that was still funny. The Static Raichu was the play.
So typically, like when you're like using, I guess we've been calling it a nichemon here. You tend to like carve out a role for it based on some of the things that it does, like that's unique to the other Pokemon in the game. Have you ever used a Pokemon that has the same niche as something that's closer to the meta just for an information advantage? Like for example, if you were going to use Salazzle instead of Weavile just to Fling, would you like drift towards a less common Pokemon that does the same thing just for the information advantage?
I don't think so. I think I may have done nearer the beginning of my VGC career.
Mm-hmm.
Like, going into this world, the last change I made was Incineroar to Salazzle for my Worlds team.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was fully prepared to bring Incineroar to
Really?
Worlds. Yes. I actually was. Like for Worlds, I definitely wanted to win. I was prepared to use whatever it would take to make me win. And if Incineroar ended up being the correct Pokemon, then I would. But Incineroar came onto the team naturally rather than just, hey, I should put Incineroar on this team because Incineroar.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up supposedly filling the roles that I wanted, even though in practice it didn't, and then ended up changing to Salazzle. I am fully prepared to use the more standard stuff. And I think that's quite an interesting comparison. Like, I think you could very easily compare me and Ashton Cox.
Yeah.
At one point, like a few years ago, I was called the British Ashton Cox. But now he's kind of gone from off-meta stuff more towards the standard.
Yeah.
And then he's come across loads of success, so it's definitely working out for him. So I do wonder if I should maybe copy him and start to use more standard stuff, because it seems to be working out for him, who used to be an off-meta person, but I have tried that and it still just doesn't work for me. Just like it's much better if I use the off-meta stuff.
I also think if we were talking about Ashton, I also think he's improved like as a player too, like especially looking back to like 2014 when he had that run at Nationals, and he was using like Specs Heliolisk and a lot of other weird stuff on that team. Like, yeah, the team was weird, but he was also like playing it well. And then when you look forward a few years, like he's had all this time playing. He plays the most out of anyone probably. Like his play point count is probably about 30,000 times greater than mine over the course of our careers. And so,
true.
I don't know if I would attribute it just to the more standard quote unquote teams, even though that might have made a difference for him. It might just be him defaulting to that kind of thing instead and using his experience. So who knows?
Yeah, that's fair.
And also his most recent departure from meta teams was somewhat unfortunate.
Yeah, there was a Lunala Solgaleo at Worlds, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jamie, most of the time, like the off meta Pokemon that you use tend to be like supportive, and as opposed to like a sweeper or like an offensive Pokemon on the team. And obviously that kind of makes sense in a restricted format, but has also kind of been the case with the exception of maybe Cloyster, which you were just talking about. So why do you feel like most of the off meta Pokemon that you use tend to fall into supportive roles as opposed to like offensive roles?
I think that's probably how teams should be built, because you should build around a core and then build the stuff around the core to help with matchups. So maybe the core is 3 Pokemon. Now you need techs or Pokemon to counter the things that would hurt the core. So then that's where the niche Pokemon come in. It's a much more organic team building process, going from like literally from scratch rather than just having a core, throw on Incineroar, Finny, and Amogus, and then let's have this last Pokemon to fill a role.
Right.
Being able to go through from the very start, adding each individual Pokemon, you end up with the core, and then you end up with the niche mons outside the core. And then that does I would say that does tend to be more supportive in a sense. But then if you look at maybe my banded Excadrill from Sun and Moon, that's definitely not a supportive Pokemon. That was a niche Pokemon that filled the role I needed, and that was just super strong with its choice band.
Yeah.
So now maybe my niche Speed Swap Pheromosa in 2017, that's a supportive Pokemon, but that's also very strong. So that can be a sweeper if it needed to be.
That's true. And just as a brief aside, I didn't know that like for all the times that you posted screen grabs in chats, I did not know that it was banded until I ran into somebody using it on a ladder, and I was like, what the?
Really?
I don't know why, but I had just never found that out.
No.
So
Yeah,
to go off on
it was great.
yeah, it does a lot. It did a lot of damage. To go off the point that you just mentioned, then why do you feel like as far as like a team building process with some of these Pokemon that you tend to kind of like tech them in as like patching holes or filling roles instead of trying to take something like I don't know, like Rampardos, for example, right, is theoretically a very strong offensive attacker that has weaknesses that are unable to overcome. Why would you try and like fill holes with niche mons as opposed to taking something and trying to build around it?
I'll just start off by saying, did you know that Choice Band Rock Slide from Rampardos Soko's Coco?
Oh my god.
I'm not shocked in the slightest.
I knew that Life Orb
It's pretty
Salad
strong.
That doesn't
with
surprise
spread.
me.
Yeah, get it under Trick Room in 17. That was good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it just goes back to the throwing on Incineroar in the place. Like, a lot of people will just default to that, and they won't ever explore. Like, if you see some of the screenshots of my team builder, I end up with like a 5 Pokemon core, and then I have like a list of 30 Pokemon going up.
Yeah.
Copying pasting every single team going up with a Pokemon that can fill in the role.
Right.
So I go through so many more Pokemon in the slot that it needs to be in than most average people would if they're just throwing on like Finny into that slot. I go through every single water type. I go through every single fairy type that could go through. So it takes a lot longer, but it's much more rewarding when you actually find the actual Pokemon that fills the niche you're looking for.
I remember you posted something in Monarch's chat at some point this year that was like, yeah, I'm finishing this team, and I can't decide what water type to use, and there were literally like 12 at the
Like
bottom of that
Starmie.
basement. Yeah.
Yeah. For my 2018 Worlds team, yeah, that was one of them. For my 2018 Worlds team, I think I sent Tommy a thing saying, I've worked out the 5 Pokemon, and I narrowed down the last slot to 42 Pokemon.
Oh my god.
So,
just 42.
yeah, I think it was 42. It was all the Pokemon that could Oko Finny without a Z move, including things like Banded Slacking and things like that.
Oh my god.
So I literally went through everything
That's
that could
funny.
Oko Finny.
So how are there 42? Because it was one thing to talk about, okay, we're trying to fill the Feeny slot. We look at water types, we look at fairy types, we look at things that get safeguard, but Banded Slacking doesn't go with the same slot as attack. So how do you, like, what is the thought process behind trying to fill a slot with Pokemon that do so many different things but are still like in the same slot in your head?
Usually you're trying to fill, I think, maybe 3 things that you'd want to accomplish with the Nichemon. If you're just accomplishing 1, then that's probably a bit too broad. Like the Oko and Finny, that was 42, give or take Pokemon. I think it was 42. But when you have 3 things that you want, the example that's coming to mind is my Breloom for Worlds. I wanted an Oko on Stack Attacker, I wanted Helping Hand on the team, and I wanted to keep Spore because it was still an Amoonguss. It was an Amoonguss before it became a Breloom.
Yeah.
So I wanted to keep those things. Like, obviously, Breloom is the one that's going to fit that role. Yeah, like having multiple things that you need the niche Pokemon to do really narrows it down to what you can get.
And you were up to 42 Pokemon, all of which did the same 3 things that you were looking for?
Oh no, that one was just one thing. Because that was a Komo-O team, so I wanted that slot to Oko Finny without the team.
Okay, that was like a crackhead archetype anyway, so that makes sense.
Well, I ended up with Life Orb Thunderous Therians, so.
Oh, okay, that's relatively standard.
Oh yeah, that wasn't like a Seju team.
It did seem to be. Yeah. I think it was the same. I think he had Taunt as well, because I had Taunt, Life Orb Taunt. Because it would help with the Charizard matchups, obviously, as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Wait, Como struggle with Zard? That's a different. Never mind. Different conversation.
No, the Como doesn't. Yeah. Everything around the Como does.
Jake is ready to talk about expanded dex formats again.
Oh my god! Please save me.
So let's just briefly depart from like the broader discussion and talk just about where we are in like a GS Cup format right now. So in the second half of the season, at least, like from Worlds, you've been favoring that one Necrozma and Xerneas archetype. But do you feel like in a GS Cup format there are certain archetypes or restricted Pokemon that favor the use of Nichemons overall?
I think so. I think that Nexus, as I coined it, I think the Nexus is the new X-Ray, in my opinion. Going like from the 2016 X-Ray.
Yeah.
I think the Blue Moon as well, the Kyogre Lunala. I think that was proved with Graham's Medicham.
Yeah.
Because that made total sense on that team and only on that archetype.
Right.
I think there was another report that came out that had a Rabombi today too. So.
Exactly. Rabombi makes a lot of sense on that team as well. Yeah. I think the other one, but it's going back to Sun and Moon, is XY. But I think that's also biased because I used it so much. Because I like the three archetypes I just said are the 3 main archetypes I've used through 19.
Yeah.
So like Blue Moon has spanned all 3. XY was Sun and Moon, and Nexus is Ultra. So maybe there's a bit of bias there, but I think that may have been the reason that I gravitated towards those archetypes, because I had the most freedom with them.
I was gonna say, like, Xerneas in general. Like, you have this Pokemon that it has such a capability to just win games on its own that if you support it well enough, like, it's gonna do that. And so if you can find these like random Pokemon that, you know, are really good at supporting one thing and one thing only, that's really all you need, especially in a format like this. So like, I thought it was like validating, at least, that you said 2 out of 3 of your answers were Xerneas, and so it's like I think it's hard to argue against Xerneas being like the most, well, Xerneas like leading to certain types of teams that are more focused on like one single win con in that Xerneas, which would be something that niche ones would support well.
I think the use of Xerneas just like opens up the entirety of fake out users.
Yeah.
It opens up, like, especially in this format with Incineroar and Stack Attacka, the entirety of fighting type Pokemon, which we saw when Joseph took Gallade into like a final finish. And
yeah, fighting type is so legit. It's such a good type in Ultra.
Right. Definitely. So I think that like Xerneas in particular, when there's just like, you know, you can write on a single piece of paper like the things that you need to beat with supportive Pokemon to allow Xerneas to win the game by itself. And in that sense, I think it definitely lends itself to Nichemons. And like you mentioned, Jamie, with like the 2 Yveltal, Xerneas being the one, and then the Nexus, as you called it, and then going all the way back to X-Ray are all very like Zern heavy teams where you just kind of like use the extra restricted Pokemon to cover some of those, matchups that already need to be covered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. With the Kyogre Lunala one as well, that focus is get Kyogre in Tailwind to Water Spout. So like that's a big focus, and there's a lot of Pokemon that can help with that. Rather than just trying to set up the Xerneas, just get that Kyogre in position as quickly as possible.
One thing that kind of keeps getting brought up is X-Ray and its kind of tendency to attract these niche mons, especially back in 2016 when we affectionately referred to it as Dumpster Exodia. And like Jamie, that's a team that you used a lot in 2016. Like you and Baz both took it to Worlds and had top 16 and top 8 finishes, and so back in 16 we had all these different Pokemon on X-Ray that were fitting well. Like you and Baz's teams again are just good examples because both of you used some pretty off-color picks. But if you look at X-Ray this year, it's become one of the archetypes, in my opinion at least, that has about some of the least variation and like some of the least use of these outside Pokemon. Like Pato X-Ray was 6 pretty standard Pokemon. You can argue that Nightligo was an outside pick at the time, but then it became very standard after that. And so, not a lot of variation from that standard in X-Ray this year. So I was wondering if you had any ideas as to what might have changed that might have caused, this lack of innovation with X-Ray this year compared to 2016.
Maybe because I wasn't building X-Ray. No. Like, to be fair, I really did try. Like I actually tried.
That's only like a half joking answer.
Yeah.
yeah. I know. It's quite amusing. The best I came up with was like a Salazzle Bishop, Ditto, Tapu Koko, I think was my best version of X-Ray.
Mm-hmm.
So like somewhat weird, but I don't understand what happened between 16 and 19, going from the dumpster Exodia, as you would say, to pretty much standard Pokemon. It has actually confused me why it's gone to that extreme, because like X-Ray was definitely the archetype in 16 with the most freedom.
Yeah.
So I think I proved that with what I managed to win a regional with.
Right.
Cottonee's never winning a regional again.
No.
So
unless you decide to try it again.
Yes.
What was the entirety of that team? Like Cottonee wasn't even the only like weird Pokemon too. It was
like
it was
Infernape and
Rotom-Wash, Infernape, Aegislash, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so that's like four,
quite the combination.
3 maybe 4 Pokemon. Because I guess Infernape got top 8 at Worlds that year too. But like Cottonee, Rotom-Wash, no one had touched those at all, especially Cottonee, obviously. But yeah. That's like X-Ray plus 4 weird mons, and then this year we have X-Ray plus 4 standard mons, and so it's just a weird difference. Like I can't really pinpoint one thing either. I think maybe the fact that Ray has gone from kind of a more outside pick to like one of the best Pokemon in the format as well. That might have had something to do with it, because more people are using Rayquaza on standard-ish teams, which means they're more comfortable using Ray with other standard mons possibly. But that's all that I could really come up with.
I think Tapu Fini has a lot to do with it too.
That's a good point. Oh, that's actually a really good point.
That's fair.
Tapu Fini is like a Pokemon that was like made to be on X-Ray.
Yeah.
In a lot of respects, like with all of the supportive options that it has, and then just like kind of being a water type next to Ray.
Yeah, I think
it's like a match made in heaven, and I think Tapu Fini kinds of like once you have Xerneas, Rayquaza, Tapu Fini, you're gonna add an Incineroar, right? And then once you have an Incineroar and a Xerneas, you're gonna add an Amoonguss.
See, this is exactly the trap that I said you should avoid.
There's 5 Pokemon right there, and I feel like that's what it is to me, at least, anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have 42 Pokemon I can now put on X-Ray, so I think the immediate speed has actually helped it become more standard a lot more than you would think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because things like Choice Band has become a lot more viable.
Right.
Because you don't have to fear the timid Xerneas moonblasting you immediately anymore. You can always just immediately outspeed it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that maybe that, like, it seems like a weird reason for something to go from, like, an archetype to go from off-meta to standards in a different season, but I think that probably has contributed more than people think.
I think Fini is also a really big contributor to that, too. Like, a lot of, like, the weird meme mons on X-Ray used to be like random water types.
Yeah.
Just for that option to like nuke Groudon with Ray. But like Tapu Fini is so good in general, and then like as a consequence, it's also good on X-Ray, and it happens to be a water type that can run a move to hit Groudon, and so I think the lack of need for a random Pokemon in that slot is also kind of like reined it in. And I think once you get to Fini, Fini supports some of the best mons so well. Though this is exactly the trap that you've been mentioning, Jamie, but like it's so easy to just throw these other good mons next to it because they just pair together so well, and everyone kind of knows how to do it already.
Yeah, I agree. Did you know that Clawitzer is much better than Fini on X-Ray?
Because it's got 75% heal pulse.
Yeah, it's got a much better heal pulse, and it gets Helping Hand, so it's much better than Fini, and it's not weak to Gengar.
That's true.
That's a big thing.
You could probably knock it out with Dark Pulse, Kate.
I think so. I don't think I've done that calc actually.
That surprises me.
Oh well, it's basically you probably could.
I think you could.
Yeah. Well, I'll do some calcs after this.
Mega Launcher is pretty good.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool. I definitely loved that design when they released it. I think it's a little underpowered. It could used to be buffed a tiny bit, I think. Or maybe give Clawitzer some stats. Cool Pokemon though. I had another so question. There's a couple Pokemon, especially over the last couple seasons, that would be considered niche to the community, but are Pokemon that you've kind of been going back to, like Superior and Salazzle are the two that kind of jump out to me. So
Yes.
If I was to put that on a team, that would be a weird pick for me, but for you, these are like kind of Pokemon that have become part of your standard arsenal. So like what is it about maybe those Pokemon in particular, or just like general things that you favor in some Pokemon that you would recycle them, across formats or across teams instead of like, building to specifically find a niche for a Pokemon?
I can tell you Superior's like straight away. I know exactly why I keep going back to Superior. It's because I like my support Pokemon to be able to still do damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, separately, like setup Pokemon. And Superior just happens to be this amazing support Pokemon with things like Glare, with the screens, with Taunt, and also happens to be a setup Pokemon.
Right.
So, like, that's combined really well. Like, pretty much my perfect Pokemon in Superior. Like, it sucks in Ultra, and I'm so sad. But
I'm sure you.
At least one probably does like
Yeah.
60 to Kyogre.
I was thinking less than
it's
that.
not
Maybe
worth.
at +2 it does 60.
Yeah, it's been since back in May, I think I've done that calc. I can't remember what it was. But, like, Salazzle, it still does the damage it needs to the Pokemon it needs to. So, like, obviously it's going to counter Xerneas very well. It's one of the few Pokemon that can 4 times resist it, even though it still usually gets 2 shot by Moonblast at +2. Yeah, like, I don't know. Because with Salazzle, I'd used it from 2018 as well, so I was still...
Right, so it's across an expanded format and a GS Cup format that it's seen use.
Yeah, I was still using it to counter the Fairy Pokemon.
Yeah.
And now I just happen to have to counter this even bigger Fairy Pokemon. So why not just keep using it, because it still works exactly the same way that it had for the niche that I had previously. And then it just happened to roll on throughout the entire format that it still kept working in Sun, it still kept working in Moon, and it still works even better in Ultra now. So it just happened to work out that way. And people, I think it's got to the point where it could probably be considered meme status about me saying that Salazzle's better than Incineroar, but I don't consider that mean. I am 100% serious every time I say that.
Yeah.
No, like, there are definitely people that are starting to come around, and I feel like that was going to be my next question for you. Is there's been a couple of instances, like over the course of your career, where your teams have kind of like redefined or drifted towards the meta to a point where people are actually using them. And the Raichu, the static Raichu team is the first one that comes to mind. But what about, like, those teams that other people have picked up and started to play? Like what is it about those teams that speaks to people that wouldn't otherwise be, like, seen building with those Pokemon?
So I'm not really sure, because most of the times my successful Boyt teams can only be used by Boyt. and like whenever I see people use my teams on Showdown after I've released a report or something, everyone's playing it wrong. like very wrong.
You idiots.
Kind of, yeah. I guess because I'm so used to countering the standard stuff, I have flowcharts against the standard, and then it's interesting to see people not use those flowcharts because they don't know.
Right.
I think that's the most interesting thing about people using my teams. But I don't think there's been, like you said, the Static Raichu team that ended up being meta in Australia of all places for months.
Oh,
and I don't
I
know
thought it was
what,
a little
like,
bit more widespread than that. Okay,
No,
it doesn't
but,
count if it's just Australia.
like in maybe the month after it won, but apparently like throughout the entire year that team was still being used in 2016 in Australia.
Oh, yeah,
Australia is
definitely.
the
So that was
Jamie
quite funny.
Boyt of continents, so that kind of
And
makes
even at the
sense.
beginning of Ultra in 2019, there were people that were using it on low ladder.
Yeah.
That team in particular is the one that I always think about because it got to a point in 2000, like in a certain point in 2016, when I was just like thunderbolting the slot next to Raichu and not even caring.
But no, like I think the biggest crime for me that I should have had the most influence for was my third regional win with my mixed Tapu Koko.
Oh yeah.
Like I am astounded how that didn't pick up.
I kind of
like
am
I
too.
understand. I know the reason. In Timorol was released 2 weeks after I won, but
That'll do
but that was actually a good thing for it because you just switch in the Koko on the Incineroar. They still don't think you can OHKO them, and because you've switched in on the Merit Neutral, you then OHKO them with the Z Wild Charge. Like that is the biggest crime that I think that I've experienced in VGC. I have I'm absolutely adamant. I broke the meta with that mixed Koko, and just no one believed me, and like I'm astounded by it.
That kind of leads us into
That's
another question, though. Like, these Pokemon like Mixed Z Koko or, your superior Salazzle, in general, across, all the VGC formats, current or past, what have been some of your favorite of these niche mons to use, or see use, not necessarily have to be your own, but, like, have there been any that you've liked playing the most? Have there been any that you've seen other people use and thought, oh, that's really cool, that have stood out more than the others?
I think we touched on the Salazzle, Superior, Cottonee, etc. Like those are the obvious ones.
Mm-hmm.
I have a newfound love for Breloom now after Worlds. It was the MVP of my Worlds run, and I'm really sad that I have to get rid of it to improve my matchups going into post Worlds. My favorite niche mon that I've ever used was only at a Premier Challenge. It was back in 2016. It was a Vigoroth.
Oh.
Vigoroth was definitely my favorite niche one. I'm going to shamelessly plug my YouTube channel because I've got an amazing video of Vigoroth like absolutely bossing this game. It was
to
amazing.
guess what it did? So,
okay,
like, obviously,
guess the
Vital Spirit,
Obviously Vital
because of
Spirit,
Smeargle,
yeah, Vital Spirit because of Smeargle. Yeah.
Does it have taunt?
Yes, it had taunt.
Okay.
Does it yawn?
It didn't have Yawn. No.
It doesn't have Fake Out, right?
No.
No. Does it have Seismic Toss?
Probably from Fire Red, but I don't think in VGC.
I wonder what...
I have no idea.
Okay, so the set was Icy Wind, because that's obviously a good move.
It has Icy Wind? Oh my
Yeah, it has
God.
Icy Wind. So Icy Wind Taunt, Roar, because Roar, and
Roar.
and also second Roar. Uproar.
Oh my God.
Oh, so it kept the partner.
It could never be put to sleep by Smeargle, and it could keep everything awake as well.
Oh my God, I love that.
It immediately, so like if your partner's asleep, using Uproar immediately wakes it up, right?
Yes,
That's
it
so
does.
funny.
Go and check out my YouTube channel. It's shameless. I think it's Vigoroth Best VGC 16. I think it's called or something like that, and it's like the third match in the video. The Vigoroth stays on the field. I think it's for like 13 turns and does something useful every single turn. Like it was amazing. Like that's definitely like it was only in one tournament, but that's definitely my favorite niche pick that I've used. I think probably the most obvious niche pick that someone else has used, but I think it's obvious at this point is the Pachirisu that won 2014 Worlds. I think that is just like the pinnacle of niche mon pick because it managed to win the biggest tournament there is, and I'm quite sad that I don't think I'll ever be able to match that. So
I'm sure you could. You have some time.
You say that. This is probably my last serious year competing.
I mean, you said that last year. Everyone says that every year. No one actually.
No, but this is actually my last serious year.
At some point, we all have to leave Neverland, Jake. That's what it comes down to. I had another. In 2016, sorry, Vigoroth. You made me think of it. You used Surskit too, didn't you?
Oh, of course.
In 2017, I did.
In 2017 or 16?
No, 17.
Oh,
Did I
17.
use it in
okay.
16? I was using the Walterium Swissman one in 17.
Oh,
Did
really?
I use it in 16? Yeah.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
think I used it in 16. I can't remember.
Did it have webs, or was
Maybe
it just
Maybe
your
it was
offensive
somebody else.
Swiss
It was
swimmer?
like it has power split, so you can like power split the legendaries and like make them do less damage.
That's funny. No, yeah, the 17 one had Hydro Pump with Z, Lunge, Sticky Web, Protect, I think.
Oh, sticky web.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say I was trying to think of what its Swift Swim niche or what its niche would be outside of just
Yeah,
obviously doing.
yeah,
a lot of
definitely
damage.
Sticky Web, yeah.
Yeah, Surskit, good Pokemon. Good Pokemon.
You say that.
All right, well, I believe it's time to play a little game, Jamie, and this is a surprise that we had been hinting at, and I'm going to let Brendan explain.
Oh,
this
here we
one.
go.
So what we decided to do is right now I have a random number generator that's open, and it is generating between 1 and 809. So
Ooh,
I
there
am
we go.
going to randomly generate a Pokemon, and I want you to take that Pokemon and find a niche for it.
A niche in Ultra or a niche in any format?
We can
Like,
do
let's-
any.
Let's talk about GS Cup a little bit, and then we'll just kind of like apply it to the wider world. Okay.
Fine.
Okay.
All right, here we go. I'm going to generate. Okay, the number is 706. Oh, I think we know this one. We had it recently on our Gudra. Okay, so Gudra is something that's... Let's talk about just Ultra. That's kind of a boring one, but...
Just Ultra.
Just
You definitely need to have give it Feint.
Okay. Okay.
That would be the main reason to run Gudra. Like, you'd use it as a wall for non-Xerneas. Like, it would wall the Primals, like, special Groudon and Kyogre. Definitely not physical. The only thing is you can't Dragon Tail away as Xerneas,
Yeah.
so it's not very useful in
Yeah,
that regard. The
it's
Sludge Bombs won't do too much. It gets really good coverage, so you'd be able... I don't think, like, as a Pokemon on its own, you'd be able to work out its moveset, but when you have the other 5 Pokemon, you'll know what moves you need to fill the slot, because you will run Assault Vest. There's no reason not to for Gudra, because you use it in non-Xerneas matchups, and even then it would probably easily tank a +2 move
It
blast,
probably
but it wouldn't do
could.
too much back to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you definitely use Feint on that Assault Vest set to make it have its niche.
Can it take an unboosted Dragon Ascent, do you think?
That might be
Because
tough.
I feel like...
Like, its HP's decent, like, to go with its special defense, but then its defense is
not
pretty
very
low.
good. Yeah.
I think you'd have to, like, invest everything into defenses to live. My benchmark is always Life Orb Ascent rather than Max Ascent. But because you don't really get a max just 252
Right.
Dragon Ascent at this point.
Mhm.
You either get, like, a 4-1, or I think it's 116 for the Bulky Berry that's Oko's Incineroar +1. But you don't really see Sash Rayquaza anymore. So you don't
Right.
really see a 252 Rayquaza, so I don't use that as a benchmark anymore. I use the Life Orb 1 if I'm going for benchmarks like that, and I don't think Gudra could without serious investment.
Gotcha.
Oh,
There
well,
it is.
and it's going to be like a Spore switch in as well. 'Cause of
Oh, yeah.
Sap Sipper.
Oh, that's right, because, yeah, you'd have no reason to run anything other than Sap Sipper, I would think.
I don't know, Gooey actually is not too bad. Because then even if you take the Dragon Ascent, then you take the Dragon Ascent, you'll slow the Rayquaza down slower than the Gudra, so you can hit it twice with a Dragon move.
And then get knocked
There you
out
go.
by an E-Speed.
No, that's why you run Lele, of course.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, we're talking niche ones. That's why you run Bruxish, of course.
Or Serena.
Sorry. Well, that's not... That's a little too standard. Okay, I'm going to do the next generation. Okay, 273. That's got to be Hoenn, right?
That's
Yeah.
definitely Hoenn, yeah.
C-Dot.
Oh, here we go. Oh, that's gonna be a tough
Wow.
one. Well, it's chlorophyll, so it can pair with Groudon.
Okay. Can it do anything once it's moving fast, though? Is it outspeeding anything with the chlorophyll boost? There's
That's a
another
good question. How about we apply it
I
to the
don't-
line? So like we could talk about Shiftry instead. That might actually be a more
Okay.
interesting.
well, the thing that came to my mind was like Shiftry gets beat up. Does C-Dot get beat up? So could you like lead C-Dot Groudon and switch Groudon immediately into a justified Pokemon and side
Yes.
beat up?
C-Dot
Beat up
does get beat up.
is-
Yeah.
Yep, it's...
Ah,
it's an
nailed it.
A. There it
Nailed
is.
it.
It's base 30 speed though. I'm not sure it's actually going to be outspeeding anything.
Oh, base 30. Okay.
Yeah, so we might have
yeah,
to
that's-
use
that's-
Nuzzle.
Oh yeah, that will underspeed code. No, that's 90 at max speed because that's what Snorlax is
Right.
at max speed.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's not even outspeeding Rayquaza. So
Poor C-Dot.
So we'd have to evolve it at least once.
I mean, Shiftry's a better dark fake out than Incineroar, so
Oh my God.
I would definitely evolve it.
It's so controversial.
You say that, but I'm right.
All right. Do you want to do one
Yeah.
more?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, go for it.
Here we go. Okay, the next one, 735. So that's Alola. Gumshoes.
Oh.
So I think Gumshoes, there was a set that was like Last Resort Normalium, Protect, and that was like those two moves.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So then you'd still be able to have the nuke of the adaptability Normalium, but then still have a nuke that isn't Giga Impact afterwards. So I think that's Gumshoes. Like I think that was a 2017 Trick Room team I saw. I'm pretty sure that's the only real reason why you'd run Gumshoes.
That's awesome. I had never even thought of that. Does it have a neat, like, is there anything that it can do in Ultra that would make it at all useful?
I mean,
Probably
it
gets
has
Roar.
Yawn.
Pretty sure it
I
gets
was
Roar.
going to say, does it get Roar?
Yeah, I'm looking through its set. It has Yawn.
Yeah,
It has Taunt.
It has Roar.
It has Roar,
Yeah.
yeah. It has Fling.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a bit too slow for Fling, isn't it? It's like 45
Yeah.
speed, is it?
There's Bulldoze.
It has Super Fang.
True.
Yeah, so like...
But it can't-
Super Fang's good for fast Pokemon, though, so...
You can run
Right.
it in Trick
But it
Room,
won't
I
take
guess.
hits. Yeah, you can
I mean,
run it.
actually, wait, no, does Strong Jaw Crunch get Lunala through Shadow Shield?
Oh, I
Ooh.
doubt it. Its base
No,
attack
bro,
is
like
only-
with a boosting. No, it's
only-
got decent attack.
It's 110.
I consider anything over 100 to be
Yeah.
decent.
Oh,
That's as strong as Incineroar. So,
Hmm.
you know,
That's true. But does Incineroar get Lunala with the boosting item? Or
I
thought
mean,
only
with a choice band, it should, right?
I'd imagine
okay.
with
Maybe with the
Lariat,
choice
yeah.
band. Yeah. Well, okay. There
Yeah.
you go. So Trick Room and then Strong Jaw Crunch. That's pretty much it.
You know, I like that.
Shoes. So let me go dump that into the filter real quick. Okay. So the last part of this, or second to last part, so Jake doesn't yell at me, is we asked you to prepare a question for us. So
Yes.
Jamie, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask about Pokemon.
That's
It's
okay.
going completely away.
Please.
Okay, so as you know, I am British.
Mm-hmm.
As I hope you are aware, you are not
That
British.
is correct.
So what is your outsider perspective of how amusing Brexit has been?
Ooh, okay. So I studied abroad in England for 6 months in the first half of 2017, which was right after Donald Trump was elected. And so whenever I was in England and people would be like, oh, so you elected Trump, I'd just mention Brexit and they would shut up.
Yeah.
Entirely fair.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, personally, I remember like hearing about it, and again, that was like the whole thing was around the same time that Donald Trump was elected. So it was like, oh, all of a sudden we have something that's a little bit more pressing domestically than to worry about what's going on across the pond. But it's funny because we both have blonde head of state.
Blonde head of states that are
Okay,
slightly
yeah,
problematic.
that's one way of saying it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing for me is Brexit has actually benefited me because we win Pokemon money in dollars, and the pound got a lot worse when Brexit happened or was voted for. So like I actually earn more money through Pokemon than I would have done without Brexit. So that's one of the, I'm not going to say few positives, but one of the few positives from Brexit that I've been able to find.
That's actually like a really funny little quirk. That's like something that would show up in like an op-ed as somebody that's sarcastically mentioning the positives to Brexit.
Yeah.
I haven't
Local
kept,
Brit Jamie Boyt.
I haven't kept too close of an eye on Brexit because it doesn't really affect me, and there's other domestic political issues that are more pressing, and to me at least. But I do think it's funny that there's so many parallels between Brexit and the 2016 election here, in that the vote was pretty much split right down the middle between like young and old people on average, and that's like a dynamic that I found interesting, was that like our generation was very strongly in favor of one thing and the older generation was very strongly in favor of the opposite. And I think in both cases, the older generation won out largely because they're like more likely to vote. I think is one thing that it boiled down to.
That was definitely the case for Brexit as well. We had a lot of young voters not turn up.
Yeah, and I think that at least in the U.S., I guess and it seems kind of like there was a sentiment with Brexit as well, as there was a whole kind of like underlying sentiment of like it'll never actually happen.
Yeah.
This can't
Well, I
possibly.
mean, it hasn't happened
this can't
yet.
possibly actually happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for the
Right,
votes
right.
at least. I mean, like I remember thinking, and I voted in the presidential election, but I remember people that hadn't registered to vote or whatever were just like, it's not a big deal. Like Trump's not going to get
Yeah.
elected, and here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. Good question though. I don't think we've ever actually talked about anything like super. That's like the most mainstream topic
Yeah.
we've discussed on this
Definitely.
podcast. So
Well, I'm glad it was a good question.
Yeah. All right. Our final little mini segment, as always, is music. My recommendation this time around is an album called Asylum by Arizona that was just released. I was forced to go see them at ACL with a friend last year, Austin City Limits Music Festival. And they were really good, and I loved them. And so I've been following them since, and they just released an album after a few singles earlier this year. So it's called Asylum. Band is Arizona. I recommend.
And Jake, I'm noticing that you didn't spell the band name correctly.
It's
so I'm just gonna
okay.
go ahead
Listen.
and fix it for you.
It's like all caps with spaces in between each letters is how it's like listed
Yeah.
as the band name. And as we were typing out this script, I didn't feel like typing all that out, so I just wrote it as the word.
It's a lack of communication.
Also, when they introduced themselves at ACL, they said we are Arizona, the band, not the state, and I found that funny because they are not from Arizona.
You have to clarify.
It's really important. I expected an entire state to be up on stage, and I just saw 4 people, and I was like, well, oh, my money back.
Now, were you disappointed or were you relieved?
I don't know. I'm in Texas. Arizona could have fit.
That's true. So I'm gonna continue on. I think I recommended some sort of like old pop punk band again, and I'm remaining on that kick here, but this one's a little bit more modern than like an old Andrew McMahon project. The band is called The Dangerous Summer. I started listening to them like way back in like high school, and they just recently released an album, which is why I've been listening to them a little bit more recently. But the album that I listened to back in the day, which I think is still their best, is called Reach for the Sun. Good band, in my opinion.
Okay, and I'm going to be super cheeky here. I'm not going to recommend a song. I'm going to recommend an entire genre, metal music.
I kind of expected that.
So many people are put off by, it's just all the time. And it's very much not. Like, there is that part to metal music. There is so much more. Like, if you put off by the vocals, there's so much singing involved in metal. You just need to explore. I will put out a song recommendation. I keep trying to find a song that, like, represents what I think of as, like, good music for me. Away from all the just shouting music. I'm still yet to find the perfect one, but the one I'm listening to a lot at the moment that I think fits quite well is Wings of Madness by Serenity. That's
you're
a very
trying to,
epic
like,
song.
You're trying to like find a type of metal that will appeal to more mainstream music listeners as like a gateway into the genre.
Yes, like I've
Okay.
come so close. I found a band that I thought would be perfect. 'Cause it's kind of like got some electronic parts and stuff, but it's still got that harsh vocal element because there's 3 vocalists: a female clean, a male clean, and then a harsh vocalist. So then that harsh vocalist just ruins the perfect band to
close.
recommend. But yeah, I'll go with Wings of Madness by Serenity for now.
I will say I fully expected Floor Jansen to leave your lips.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised that wasn't what came up.
Oh, I was considering that. I wish. Don't you worry.
Well, I'm glad at least we don't have to talk about it. Carly Rae forever.
Yeah, she's not a queen.
Oh no. We need to end this now
We're
before
gonna
it's
take this.
dirty.
We're gonna take this off, Mike. We're gonna take this off, Mike. So that's gonna wrap up our second segment for our episode 9 here. A big thank you to Jamie for coming on to his show. This is a segment that we've been talking about for a couple weeks, but because Jamie's been going to bed at a reasonable hour, it's been hard to schedule across our like transatlantic time zones. So we're finally able to make it work here, and I think this was a really good episode.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Jamie, for coming. We're happy that you stayed up a little late for us. We appreciate it, and
It's Friday.
Yeah,
Everything's fine.
This was a lot of fun, and I'd be happy to come back on whenever you want.
So next week,
Awesome.
tomorrow.
Next week? Sure.
Right
Now we'll talk about standard
There we go.
Pokemon
Yeah.
this time.
Yeah. You can spread the anti-standard propaganda. Any like final words for the audience before we wrap
Where might
up?
we be able to find you on the internet?
My Twitter handle is Jamie Boyt VGC. I've got a YouTube channel that's just Jamie Boyt. I post very infrequently now because I'm in the process of becoming a teacher and have no free time at all. But that's where I put all my team reports from my successful teams from past formats, so they're all archived. Go and check out Vigoroth Best VGC 16. Yeah, I think that's the main things that I want to plug.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for coming on. We are going to wrap up this second segment here, and Jake and I will step away for just a few seconds and come back with our weekly wrap-up. But again, big thank you to Jamie, and stay with us for just a couple seconds. And welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us through Jake's musical interlude. Again, thanks for joining us for episode 9 this week. We're really pleased with what we put together with Jamie, and obviously he's a super interesting person to talk about and provides insight on this particular topic to a level that literally nobody else can. It's his thing. So
I'm not sure that
really
anyone else could have
that.
done that.
I mean, other people can try, but I think that nobody can talk about niche Pokemon and then have a resume to back it up as well as Jamie can.
Jamie is often that was gonna be so good and I just messed it up.
I knew what you were going for.
Often imitated, never replicated is what I was trying to say, and that would have been perfect, but I just had to go and mumble and whatever.
Words are hard.
Subscribe, follow us on
hard.
Twitter.
Yeah. We've already got, I believe, our guest booked for the next episode, so be looking forward to that in 1 to 2 weeks. I think
we might aim to release it.
We briefly
early.
discussed releasing it early, but please nobody hold us to that. Life is hard. Scheduling is hard. It's just I'm fine.
Are you?
So yeah, we'll have episode 10 coming out within the next 1 to 2 weeks. Again, we're kind of emphasizing the second half of our show at this point, and I think episode 10 will definitely be sticking to those guns.
Right. Yeah. I'm really excited for that. It should be a really cool topic to talk about, and something that's been relevant, within the last couple weeks, and then
controversial too.
Yeah, exactly, and at other points in VGC history as well. So
yeah,
it'll be fun to talk about, and
yeah.
Something that I'm not sure that many people have talked about before, which will be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it's really been publicly addressed other than whining on Twitter. Right. I think this is the first time that, we talked about circuit structure and stuff like that, but I don't think that it's controversial to say that there need to be changes. But anyway,
right.
There are definitely two sides to this argument, so we'll try to explore that a little bit during.
I can't wait to
episode.
get canceled.
For you to get canceled? You want me
well,
to cancel
for me
you?
personally, the show to get canceled.
Jake,
I live for drama.
You're canceled, Jake.
Oh no!
Cancel culture is alive and well here on Soundproof.
Anyway,
thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with episode 10. So continue to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, Instagram, whatever the heck social media we have at this point, and then of course you can find our podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, that'll do it for us for episode 9. For Brendan Lewis and Jake Muller, that's it.